I'm Stephanie Leary, and this is a book blitz about stories within stories. First, we have Scott Westerfeld's Afterworlds. This is a love letter to the young adult writing community in New York City. Our protagonist, Darcy, has gotten a huge book deal for her National Novel Writing Month project. She moves to New York instead of going to college, and she finds her tribe of fellow writers and falls in love with one of them. Embedded in this novel is the story that Darcy is writing. Every other chapter is the novel within the novel. It's a young adult fantasy romance based on Hindu mythology, but the story is changing before your eyes as she revises it based on critiques from her writing group. In this book, you get both the big, epic fantasy romance and an intimate story about growing up and balancing creativity with the practical reality of everyday life. Our second story is called Character Bleed. This is actually one very, very long story that was published in 3 parts. It's a sweet, sweeping contemporary romance between 2 actors who are very caught up in their character's love story. One of them is secretly a writer, and he's also hiding some trauma from an abusive relationship. The other is an action hero who's trying to move into more serious roles, and he also wants to get to be bisexual on screen for the first time. They both have fears about not being good enough as themselves and hiding behind roles and personas. In these books, we get to see the big dramatic movie that they're filming in gorgeous historical locations, but we also get to see their quiet little moments of shared connections over their nerdy secret interests. Both the movie storyline and their actual romance are very steamy, and they get a little kinky. Our third book is Olivia Dade's Spoiler Alert. This is a sharp, funny contemporary romance that's also a love letter to fan culture. She's a very no-nonsense scientist who's been hiding her cosplay and her fanfiction hobbies from her colleagues. He's a famous actor who pretends to be a himbo in order to protect his privacy, but online he's secretly nerding out over character development and historical accuracy. All 3 of these stories are about finding partners who support you in your weird pursuits and who help you set aside other people's expectations and learn to be yourself. Tonight we have a patron who likes Cat Sebastian's Regency romances. Cat is best known as a writer of gay and lesbian romances, but she has a few straight ones as well. Her books are steamy, snarky, very funny, often include social justice themes, and some very sharp critiques of capitalism. So first up, this is the closest read-alike I can think of. Courtney Milan is very similar to Cat Sebastian in her humor and her inclusion of social justice themes in her work. Most of her romances are straight Regencies, but this one goes back to the American Revolution for a prequel to her current series that involves the guys who will become the gay uncles in the later books. It's very funny. There's a road trip where they're forced to travel together for a while, and like many of her books, this involves some very prickly people who are learning to be vulnerable with each other. Next up, we have Olivia Waite's The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics. This is a lesbian Regency about a scientist's widow and a scientist's daughter, and the widow hires the daughter to translate an astronomy paper that was left by her husband. The setup is very similar to the Lawrence Brown affair, where you have one character who's being hired kind of as an academic assistant to the other. In this case, they're both women. The daughter is the uncredited collaborator of her late father, who's been corresponding with them for 10 years. Waite's work is not as overtly funny as Courtney Milan or Cat Sebastian, but this is a lovely little novella that, again, has some very prickly people learning how to be tender with each other. And then finally we have Cecilia Grant. She has not written very many novels, unfortunately, but she is one of the few historical writers who I think can match Courtney Milan and Cat Sebastian for humor. You can't go wrong with this series. This is the first one. It is about a widow who blackmails her neighbor into a very transactional relationship. She is determined not to have fun or be charmed by him in any way. And of course, that's not going to work out very well for her. It gets pretty steamy. Cecilia Grant tends not to get into the big social justice themes, but her heroines are very feminist and opinionated, and she does funny, snarky dialogue so well. So I hope that one of these will work out. And you can't go wrong with any of the books by any of these authors, really, but we'll start with these three for now.